71%. That's how much of the Earth's surface is covered by water. It's crazy when you think about the fact that over 80% of the ocean is unmapped, unexplored, unobserved, unknown. It's no wonder we as a species have spent centuries asking ourselves what lies beneath. In today's video, I thought it would be fun to do up a deep dive on mermaids. Boom. So one of the first mentions of what we'd consider a mermaid is the homegirl Atargatis. We're talking ancient Assyria around 1000 BCE. She was kind of a big deal. She was the chief goddess of northern Syria. Her main thing was fertility, but she was also the city's protector. So you'd pray to her if you and your partner were trying to have a kid, but you'd also pray to her right before you run into battle. Now, as the legend goes, she fell in love with a mortal. They had a kid, but she was low-key embarrassed. Like, yo, what am I doing? That post-nut clarity hit different. She threw herself into a lake and her body was transformed into a fish. But her top half, that remained human. Before the word mermaid ever existed, before sailors, maps, folklore, humans were already imagining half-human, half-fish beings. For the most part, the depiction was positive. We're talking about revered, sacred figures. In ancient Mesopotamia, we see creatures called Kululu. Fish-bodied, human-headed beings. They were everywhere, man. We're talking early art temples, city gates, shrines warding off evil. So the idea of mermaids didn't come from sailors tripping at sea. And I ain't gonna hold you, before doing up the research for this joint, that's what I thought. Like, yo, some drunken sailor out at sea, he sees something, his imagination fills in the blanks, he tells somebody, they tell somebody. But nah, it goes way back. We're talking religion, art, symbolism, all that. It was like a mixture of the unknown, the magical, the mythical, and the spiritual. But, real talk, it was all birthed from humans doing what we do best. Trying to understand the world around us. Trying to understand water, this extraordinary thing that gave us life, gave us food, made exploration possible, but also could be unpredictable and dangerous. Alright. So time does its thing. Weeks, months, years, centuries. And that image of the divine protective goddess mermaid, it starts to shift. Gods become legends. Legends become folklore. And maybe it's a reflection of us. We've seen things. We've got a few battle scars. And the stories we tell, the folklore, it gets darker. When you think of sirens, you think of mermaid-like creatures who lure sailors to their death. But the crazy thing is, in ancient Greece, sirens were depicted as human-bird hybrids. We're talking feathers, wings, talons. They would sit on rocks and sing beautiful hypnotic songs, guiding sailors to their doom. It was temptation, seduction, and death. But over time, especially during the medieval period, artists, monks, storytellers, and scholars started blending the two ideas, the temptation part and that ancient fish body imagery. And yo, it couldn't have come at a better time because it lined up perfectly with the zeitgeist and where everybody's heads were at. It made sense too because the sea was seen as being more frightening than the sky. And hey, you know how Christianity do, man. The religious views on temptation and demonic forces really helped shape this new idea of sirens and mermaids. So now in medieval Europe, mermaids symbolize lust, vanity, the dangers of desire. We get images of mermaids holding mirrors, combing their hair, gazing at themselves, looking vain and beautiful. They represent temptation, seduction, and that of course leads to destruction. So it's safe to say at this point in history, mermaids have been stripped of their divinity. They're no longer protectors. There's no shrines, no worship. They are officially in their femme fatale villain era. They are basically bad omens. Seeing a mermaid meant a storm was coming. It meant the ship wouldn't make it home. It meant someone was about to die, bro. It wasn't symbolic or metaphorical anymore. Nah, mermaids were now linked directly to sailors' real-world experiences. This is where mermaids stop being myth and start being sightings. Gaius Plinius Secundus, aka Pliny the Elder, was a well-respected man in ancient Rome. Bro was an author, a scholar, a scientist, a naturalist, a decorated naval and army commander of the early Roman Empire. Oh, and he believed in mermaids. He wrote about mermaid sightings. According to him, they were scaly, human-like sea creatures that could be found along the shores of the Mediterranean. And it wasn't just him. Some of the high-ranking officials of the time also claimed to have seen these mermaids. He also talks about reports from the governor of Gaul to Emperor Augustus, all about dead mermaids washing up ashore. Fast forward to the age of exploration. That's when the sightings go crazy. European sailors are sailing across the ocean. They're crossing oceans they don't understand, mapping coastlines they've never seen, and they're spending months, sometimes years at sea. And over again, they report the same thing. Human-like figures in the water watching the ships pass by, sometimes swimming alongside them. Hey, even our boy Christopher Columbus got caught up in the mix. In 1493, he wrote in his journal about seeing 3 mermaids off the coast of the Caribbean. These weren't sirens or banging mermaids though. In fact, homeboy was a little disappointed by their appearance, going on to say they weren't as beautiful as legend described. Man said, not half as beautiful as they are painted, since in some ways they have a face like a man. Yo, I think it's funny that he refers to the mermaids as not being beautiful because they look like dudes. That low-key says more about how rough the men he was rocking with looked than the mermaids. My man was expecting some smoking hot mermaid chicks, but instead got some beefy, clapped looking mermaids. Alright, so in the 1700s and 1800s, mermaids level up to the newspaper era. Local papers across Europe and America, they all start reporting sightings. Fishermen seeing half-human creatures near shore, strange bodies washing up on beaches, villagers claiming repeated encounters. And these weren't trashy clout-chasing tabloids, not yet. These were the same papers reporting ship arrivals, weather, deaths. Mermaids were treated as odd, but possible. It's like people wanted to believe. They wanted to believe in something mystical, something unexplainable, something more. The reports describe the mermaids as being not fish, not human, something in between. Human-shaped torsos, unusual skin texture, distorted features, but there's no tangible proof. And of course, that's when science came through. Alright, science stepped up and did what science always does when people start having too much fun believing the improbable. It hit us with a possible explanation. Manatees. And on paper, it makes sense. The way they move, they can kind of sit up, they got those bulbousy features. On a dark night, if you squint real hard, I can see how a dehydrated, sleep-deprived, lonely sailor could let the imagination run wild. But here's the thing, most of the stories emphasize the long hair, the arms shaped like ours, the human faces, the beauty. And yo, let's not forget, these sailors were not newbies, man. They were not doofuses. These were experts. They were experts at the sea. Most of them came from generations of sailors and fishermen. They knew fish. They knew mammals. They knew what belonged out there and what didn't. They'd encountered seals, manatees, all that. So y'all better put respect on these sailors' names, bro. Whatever they were seeing out there, it was enough to make him second guess what was in the realms of possibility, which raises the uncomfortable question. If they weren't seeing mermaids, why were they all seeing the same thing? And what is it that they were seeing? Now, not every case came from a genuine place. You know how we go. Every time there's a mystery, mythical, gray area kind of story, pranksters and hoaxes come out the woodworks. Sometimes just for the love of the game. Sometimes for clout. More often than not is for money, you know. The most famous of these being the Fiji mermaid. This weird, grotesque mashup of a monkey torso and a fishtail. In 1842, P.T. Barnum, the Brer Who the Greatest Showman is loosely based on, leased the thing and showcased it in his museum in New York. Huge crowds rocked up to see this thing. There was all this media frenzy. Everybody was bugging out, like people wanted to believe. And unfortunately, once people found out that they'd been duped and other hoaxes started getting exposed, mermaids went from strange but possible to fake and most likely impossible. Alright, now so far we've covered the Eurocentric version of mermaids. What about the rest of the world? What do African mermaids look like, bro? That's the question. Alright, let's check out the OG African mermaid, Mami Wata. Now, as the name suggests, Homegirl is a water spirit. And in some traditions, she's a straight up goddess. She appears across West Africa, Central Africa, and parts of East and Southern Africa. African links to water spirits go as far back as the continent itself. But historically, scholars believe Mami Wata's modern form emerged around 1400s, 1500s during early contact between Europeans and West Africans. European ships, European art, European mermaid imagery came through, and you had all these European sailors kicking it with West African sailors and fishermen, and they were chopping it up, comparing notes, and talking about mermaids. And that European imagery of mermaids was absorbed into the pre-existing African spiritual systems, giving birth to Mami Wata, which probably explains why visually she stood out, often described as being light-skinned, sometimes straight up European looking. No ties to the ancestors, no ties to family, just a white girl mermaid. Long hair, a mirror, a comb. She kind of looks and sounds a little familiar, don't she? Yeah, see, we're now getting the same mermaid imagery that we got in Europe. Same vibe, same energy, but in Africa, there's a big difference. The mirror isn't vanity, it's not seduction, it's something deeper. She's got a bigger part to play, and she's more interested in the goings-on of mortals. And the differences don't end there. The locals believe Mami Wata lives underwater in a mansion. MTV Cribs type stuff. Not a cave, not a reef, a mansion, bro. Luxury, wealth, boss chick energy. And when she comes ashore, usually at night, she's combing her hair, she's waiting patiently, she is low-key on a mission. And it's not always in the physical realm either. Sometimes she rocks up in dreams on some Freddy Krueger vibes. People who encounter her are said to receive wealth, success, beauty, power, extrasensory perception. But it always comes with a price. Always. Kinda like a twisted genie. In many traditions, Mami Wata offers riches in exchange for sexual restrictions. Sometimes total celibacy, no marriage, no children. In other versions, she makes it so that you can only get some from her. She's like, that meat is mine for life. She demands loyalty. She demands obedience. Your body belongs to her. That's the deal. And if you break that verbal contract, she takes it all back with a quickness. Your money, your health, your sanity, gone. So when people saw someone successful seemingly lose it all, they didn't go, "Ah, he got unlucky." They went, "Yo, I guess that boy was messing with Mami Wata." In Liberia, studies in the 1960s found that belief in Mami Wata was held by the majority of the population. So we're not talking like a little fringe thing. Nah, we out here mainstreamed up. We saw an influx of psychiatric patients who were convinced that their illness came from possession by Mami Wata. The possession stories are wild, man, and they further highlight how in Africa, mermaids weren't just half fish, half human chicks seducing sailors. They were seen as having so much more power, being able to grant wishes, reshape reality, appear in dreams. Shoot, in some stories, Mami Wata doesn't even appear as a mermaid at first. She rocks up as a snake slithering through, then she shapeshifts into a gorgeous woman. In the 1800s, images of Indian snake charmers spread through Europe and Africa. Those images fused with Mami Wata's pre-existing identity. So she went from looking like a white girl mermaid to more of an exotic Indian-looking chick. Now, as you can imagine, as Christianity and Islam spread, Mami Wata started getting a bad rap. All of a sudden, she wasn't a spirit, she wasn't a goddess, she wasn't divine, she was a temptress, a demon, a test of faith, which is wild because that's the exact same arc we saw in Europe. When religion got involved, we went from sacred to feared to demonized. Different continent, same story. Now, if you think Mami Wata was next level, you are not ready for what Japan got going on. So, the OG Japanese mermaid is the Ningyo, and she's built different. Japanese folklore describe her as a fish with a humanish face, sharp monkey-like teeth, long hair, glowing eyes. Its flesh shimmers like it's trapped between two worlds. No singing, no seducing, no mirror, no combing hair, just a creepy looking fish thingy. But just like in the African folklore, there was some magical powers in the mix. As Japanese legend has it, if you eat Ningyo flesh, you gain eternal life. That's right, no aging, no sickness, no natural death. One of the most famous Ningyo stories is about a girl called Yao Bikuni. So, her father was a local fisherman. One day he's out at sea, he's doing his thing when he catches something strange, a Ningyo. He doesn't know what it is. He thinks it's just a weird fish or whatever, so he nices it up, cooks it, and serves it to his peoples. But everybody at the table is looking at their plates and they can sense something's off. It's like a joint gut feeling. They're like, something ain't right here, man. So they're like, nah, we ain't eating that. They don't want to offend the dude, so they don't say nothing. They just hide the grub, pretend they've chowed it down. All except for one person. A young girl. She nyams it up unknowingly. And from that moment on, she stops aging, bro. She just stops. Years, decades, centuries go by. Everybody she encounters ages and dies. She watches dynasties, kingdoms rise and fall. The world changes around her. She becomes a traveling nun, rolling through Japan, praying, watching, outliving everyone. She lived for 800 years, with some sources saying she finally sealed herself in a cave in her hometown and passed away peacefully, being granted the mortality she had been desperately praying for centuries. Sightings of Ningyo weren't just personal tragedies. It wasn't just one-on-one encounters. They were seen as national warnings. Japanese texts tell us that Ningyo appearances were followed by earthquakes, tsunamis, epidemics, famine. Catching one wasn't lucky. It meant something bad was coming. It was a bad omen. Kind of reminds you of medieval Europe, huh? Remember how seeing mermaids meant storms, shipwrecks, death at sea? I think it's dope that the whole idea of them being signs of bad stuff about to go down pops up in these different cultures worlds apart. Of course, it could just be a coincidence, but it's a little weird. It's a little weird, bro. It's a little weird. Alright, so we know what European, Japanese, and African mermaids are saying. Let's see what South America's working with. South America, step up to the front of the congregation, please. Alright, so this mermaid, she doesn't come from temples, monasteries, or sailors' logbooks. She comes from the jungle, in rivers so wide they feel like oceans. This is the Amazon, and this is Lara, sometimes called Iara or Iara. And here's the crazy part. Before she was a mermaid, she was a human being. Ha! In indigenous Tupi folklore, Lara was a young woman, exceptionally skilled, a warrior, a protector of her people, standing on business. She was respected, feared, and admired. Big boss chick energy, out here making moves. But you know how it be, man. Wherever there's greatness, there's gotta be haters. And they didn't want to see her shine. According to the legend, her brothers were consumed with jealousy and they tried to take her out. Man, I swear it be your own people. But Lara was about it, man. She stood her ground and flipped the script. When her pops found out she'd taken her brothers out, he swished. And yo, we got two versions of the story, both of them tragic. In the first one, she gets thrown into the river, held down, game over. In the second version, she gets taken out first and then dumped in the river, and they blame it on the night goddess Jackie. Jackie over here like, what did I do? But here's the thing though, Lara had so much greatness in her, even death couldn't contain her. The spirits of the river stepped in and transformed her. Her legs fused into a tail, her body adapted to the water, her beauty intensified. She didn't just survive the river, she became a part of it. Now, with a tragic backstory like that, you already know Lara's not gonna be a goody-goody mermaid. She appears at night, sitting on riverbanks, floating just beneath the surface. She sings, soft, hypnotic, and when men hear her voice, they can't fight it. They follow her. Some versions say she drags them underwater. They drown, they're never seen again. Other versions say something creepier. The men return. They return, but they're not the same. They're disoriented, disconnected, unable to function in the human world, like a part of them is forever lost in the river. So, we can see similarities here between Lara and the sirens of medieval Europe. But the key difference here is motivation. With Lara, it's not about temptation. This is retribution, revenge. It's not random. She targets men as a clapback. It ties back to her betrayal, the punishment without justice. The river didn't create a monster, it created a response. In Lara's mythology, the river isn't a setting. It isn't a background thing. It's alive. It judges. It protects its own. Just like with Ningyo, just like with Mami Wata, water isn't passive. It reacts. When the Europeans arrived in South America, they brought their own mermaid myths, their own stories and imagery, and slowly but surely, Lara's story started changing. She became more sexualized, more villainized, less tragic. Yo, even her appearance changed. Before, she was described as having long dark hair, black skin, and features similar to the indigenous tribes of the area, which made sense. But then European artists started painting her as blonde and blue-eyed. But yo, the original story and belief lived on. It was passed down through word of mouth, through different generations. Until this very day, people living near the Amazon still talk about Lara. She's the reason they'll urge you not to travel alone at night, to respect the river, to not assume you can control nature. Alright, now let's talk about sightings, baby. Let's talk about modern day sightings. 1943, Key Islands, Indonesia. During World War II, Japanese soldiers stationed on the Key Islands reported some weird encounters. Now, the locals, they weren't tripping. They already knew about them, calling them orang ikan, which literally means fish people. Witnesses described them as having pinkish, rough skin, long arms, legs like frogs, spikes on their shoulders, neck, spine, faces that were kinda human-like but completely alien and uncanny. Sometimes they were seen on land, bro, not just in the water. Soldiers claimed to have seen them pop up, make strange noises, and then vanish back into the water. Yo, I promise you that couldn't be me. These soldiers are braver than me, man. They're better than me. Because I would have abandoned my post immediately with a quickness. I turned into Arnie looking at my boy talking about, get to the chopper. One commander claimed to have seen a dead one. Apparently, it was like 4'9" tall, humanoid features, and not like anything known to science. These soldiers were willing to go on record, filing a military report talking about, we don't know what these things are, we don't know where they came from, but we've seen them. 1967, British Columbia, Canada. Picture this. You're on a ferry, sightseeing with a fam, having a good time. Suddenly, you see something on the beach. A blonde-haired woman, topless, chowing down raw salmon, and her lower body is a fish-like tail. Multiple people swore they saw her. There was even one photo taken of the scene. Locals were shook. Someone even put up a $25,000 reward for a capture. Now, the photo is blurry, okay? It's taken from a distance. To me personally, it kind of looks like a chick wearing one of those mermaid costume thingies. But then again, it's hard to tell. What do you guys think? Was it a hoax? Just a random chick dressed up as a mermaid who fancied the taste of salmon? Or was it a rare glimpse into the unexplainable? 1998, Kailua Kona, Hawaii. 20 minutes off the coast of Kauai, a diver named Jeff Fleischer was working when he saw something that changed his life forever. Floating near the surface, a figure swimming with dolphins, not behind them, not trailing, keeping pace. He thought it was a woman at first, like, yo, shawty can swim. Look at her keeping up with them dolphins. Then she jumped out of the water and he saw it. Scales on her lower body and a fishtail, bro. She was a mermaid. He had 6 other divers with him and they all saw her. So they're freaking out and she jumps out of the water again and they get a second look like, yo, and then she disappears under the surface. But wait, there's more. About an hour later, they arrive at the joint. They're diving. He's got his camera out, taking pictures of the fish, exploring. Then the mermaid swam past him, brushing against his leg. He aimed his camera and click, 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 took some pictures as she dipped. Now, apparently, the photos were examined by 3 reputable photography labs. They analyzed them and concluded that none of them had been tampered with. 2009, Kiryat Yam, Israel. This one is crazy. Dozens of locals, not just 1 or 2. We're talking like dozens of eyewitnesses, all claiming to have seen a mermaid off the coast. Near sunset, beautiful setting. They said she would appear in the water, swim in patterns, play in the waves, perform tricks. She was loving the attention. The story got so big, the government got involved. Yes, the government. They offered $1 million reward for a verified photo. A TV crew from NBC even set up cameras above and below the water, trying to catch a glimpse of this playful mermaid. They did manage to capture something, a human-shaped figure dipping below the surface, but it wasn't quite conclusive enough to call it evidence. 2012, Zimbabwe dam workers. So now we're in Zimbabwe. Construction workers are trying to install crucial water pumps near Gokwe and Mutare, but all work comes to a halt because they encounter mermaids. And these mermaids, they're not happy, bro. They describe them as being pale-skinned with long, dark hair and fishtails. They attack the workers. A few of them go missing. They're like, yo, we didn't sign up for this. They quit. They're like, forget the money, forget the job, we quit. Out-of-town workers get brought in to finish the job. And these are workers who don't share the same superstitions that the locals have. They go into it like, yo, man, it's all just rubbish. We got this. But they run into the same mermaid drama, and they also call it quits. The Water Resources Minister, Samuel Sipepankomo, gets in front of Parliament and tells them they need to do up some traditional rituals to appease the spirits. So, elders rocked up to the sites, they brewed traditional beer, they performed ancient rituals, and it worked. The mermaids backed off and work resumed. Now here's what I find interesting. We have centuries of mermaids being goddesses, warnings, omens, curses, revenge spirits, horror stories told by sailors. And then you fast forward to today and we have little girls having mermaid themed birthdays, cute baby outfits with mermaids on them. We had little black girls watching the trailer of The Little Mermaid and getting their minds blown by the fact that Ariel looked like them. Speaking of The Little Mermaid, when Disney dropped the OG joint in 1989, it was a game changer. It low-key reprogrammed how an entire generation saw mermaids. Ariel wasn't a warning, she wasn't a punishment, she wasn't a spirit, she wasn't a monster, she wasn't a goddess. She was just curious, innocent, misunderstood, trapped. All she wanted was to be part of our world. And the ocean, it wasn't terrifying and mysterious. It was colorful, safe, musical. We had a singing Jamaican crab in it, bro. Kids watching the movie either wanted to be Ariel or they thought she was pretty and wondered what it would be like to have a mermaid girlfriend. What? Just me? Yo, listen, every redhead I've ever hooked up with needs to thank the Little Mermaid for planting that seed. But here's the crazy thing, right? The original Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen, dark. The mermaid feels pain with every step she takes on land. She doesn't get the prince, she dissolves into sea foam. No happy ending, no wedding. The price of wanting humanity was suffering. We took that and flipped it on his head. We focused on the beauty. We made them friendly, safe. Maybe because deep down, we don't want the ocean to be dangerous anymore. We want to believe it can be mastered, understood, lived in. Mermaids didn't just stay in the movies. People started becoming them, okay? This is mermaiding. A real subculture where people wear hyper-realistic mermaid tails. They swim professionally in the water. They perform at aquariums, events, and festivals. They train breath control, dolphin kicks, free diving. This isn't cosplay, this is discipline. Some mermaids train harder than athletes. We're talking apnea, strength, grace, endurance. They move like something that belongs underwater. We've made it playful, beautiful, elegant. We've removed the danger. But here's the thing. The ocean didn't change. We did. We stopped listening to the warnings. We stopped telling the scary versions. We turned the unknown into entertainment. The same creature that once meant storm, death, punishment, loss, now represents freedom, self-expression, escape, fantasy. And maybe that says less about mermaids and more about us. Because if mermaids were never meant to be cute, if they were always meant to be warnings, then what does it mean that we've turned them into dreams? And more importantly, what happens when the ocean reminds us it was never ours to tame?